So now I'm going to be handing things over to our moderator, presenter today, Angela Rapp-Kennedy, who is CQL's Vice President of Special Projects. And Angela will get us started. She'll intro all the panelists, and then we'll go from there.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Once again, this is a very popular topic. We had our previous Human Rights Committee Part 1, where we did the webinar and really just talked about human rights committees and best practice. And there were so many questions and so much interest. What we did to come up with our panel today is I sent out an email to all the CQL staff and said, you know, I'm just curious, have you run into some organizations who have some novel things or are doing some exciting things, or just that you think would be great to share with? And so I got a nice list of folks and reached out and talked to people. So one of the reasons our webinar is going to be 90 minutes today is because we found so many fascinating topics that we wanted to share them with you all. So what we're going to do is, this is going to be very informal. I'm just going to introduce folks and ask them a few questions. They're going to share. We're trying to keep each of our segments to about 10 minutes so that by the time we get done, we'll have plenty of time with questions. So I think we should just probably launch in. So what's really exciting is we have an incredible array of different organizations, different locations, and different kind of topics that we've asked people to address. So we've got Epic from Illinois, and Doris will be chatting with us. We've got Community Living Brant in Ontario, Canada, and Katie's with us. St. Louis ARC, we've got Jessica is going to talk to us there. At Trinity, we've got Jennifer and Daphne. Alpha, Mallory's with us. Aspire, we have Tina and Marjorie. And I'm hoping that our Canadian friends are going to be able to join us. Obviously, the time difference is a little challenging, so we'll wait and see if they're able to make it on with us. So we're going to start out with Jennifer and Daphne. So Trinity Services is in Illinois, and I'm going to ask Jennifer and Daphne to turn their cameras on. And first of all, just Jennifer, Daphne, could you tell us just a little bit about Trinity and about who you are?
I actually am going to give Daphne an opportunity to introduce herself first.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, my name is Daphne Ron, and I've been with Trinity for 15 years. I've grown with the participants. It feels good because I can speak up and speak out.
Thank you.
And my name is Jennifer Klaus. Currently with Trinity, my main role is Director of Admissions, but I'm also the chairperson for our Human Rights Committee. So for those of you that don't know about Trinity, we serve close to, I think, about 5,800 adults and children that have developmental or intellectual disabilities. Some people are also recovering from mental health challenges. So sort of our goal is to help people flourish through supportive services such as residential opportunities. We have community day service programs, employment services. We have a wide array of mental health supports, such as counseling, crisis services. We have PSR programs. So we have a wider range of services where we can connect people to them if they feel they need that type of support.
Fabulous, thanks. So we, the CQL staff that reached out to me to say, well, maybe Trinity would be a great idea, is they were very impressed with how much you've been able to support the people who receive services who might be going through the process of potential rights restrictions and how you've been able to support them to be active participants in that process. So could you tell us a little bit more about how that works, what you've done, you know, maybe some lessons learned, that kind of thing?
Sure. So one of the main things that we talk about a lot is providing opportunities to people we serve and providing options to people we serve. So one thing that we developed or sort of, talked about is sort of taking a step back and recognizing what areas we could increase our efforts in. So kind of revamping and vamping up our education about rights and what the Human Rights Committee is. That also includes helping people understand who the committee members are and having them introduce themselves and what roles they play on the committee. And really kind of diving in and focusing on making sure the people we serve are involved with that entire process. So sort of helping them to recognize what's important to them in that process. So what are areas that maybe they have an understanding of right now, but also what are areas that they have a desire to learn more about. And those are the areas that we support them with and trying to help them learn more about it. So some of the things that we've been doing, kind of how I mentioned, revamping the education about rights and the Human Rights Committee, is through various resources and tools. And this could include the development of videos that kind of introduce people to the Human Rights Committee, kind of showing what a Human Rights Committee meeting looks like. Sort of peer-to-peer education as well. We had a few people that wanted to be a part of that process with the development of the education we were looking at. So that's one of the things that we've done. One of the other things that we have done is communication can be conducted through various ways. One thing that we have done is created a document or a form that is also a way of communicating. And with this form, it's basically used as a tool between someone that we support and also their preferred staff or a queue who are sitting with them and having conversations with them about what their current understanding is about rights and the Human Rights Committee and what is important to them with reviews and how that review can be meaningful to that particular person. So looking at various areas when you're having meetings, what does it look like for that person? So is that person comfortable being on a Zoom meeting, or are they somebody that maybe isn't comfortable being on a huge meeting where they need more of a private review, and they've indicated that. So we're really diving into looking at what is most important to that person, and it's different for everybody. And that's one of the areas that we are recognizing and sort of increasing our efforts with, because it's going to look, different for everybody. Because ultimately, when you're talking about human rights and rights, that's affecting that person's quality of life. So the most important thing is understanding how they feel about it, how comfortable they are with it, and sort of moving through that process with them, as well as supporting them. So if they've indicated they want to be a part of that process and they want to present for themselves, what are we doing to support them through that process, and how are we helping them to prepare for that presentation? And also looking at if somebody is not interested, in participating, is it also somewhere where they just want to learn more about it and get more comfortable with it before they present? So those are some more learning opportunities that we're looking at to help people that we serve with the process. So those are sort of the main areas that we've talked about. Other things that we look at include, we serve some people that maybe have a job in the community where maybe they can't make the meeting time, and we try to accommodate that. So talking with them about what time makes sense for their schedule and seeing if we can work around that and having that conversation with them. So those are some of the components that we've been looking at and really diving into to see, you know, how we can help support and also create a meaningful experience for that person. So I wanted to kind of hand it over to Daphne as well, because I think she wanted to talk a little bit about her experiences and what it means to her with being a part of the Human Rights Committee and sort of how she feels about it.
Thanks, Jen. I would like to say, though, that the reason why I joined the Human Rights Committee is because of the fact that, first of all, I've been growing with everyone. And second of all, because I've been with Trinity now for 15 years, and I've grown and I'm still growing with the participants. And it feels good because I can speak up and speak out, especially if it's something that my house needs or wants from me or from whoever is dealing with the situation. And the other reason why I love human rights is because of the fact, though, that it gets me out. And I love to be out. Now, I know that we've been on Zoom now for a while, but still, it gets me out. And I feel very, very good on the Human Rights Committee.
Thank you both so much. Do you have any kind of last suggestions or kind of successes, lessons that you learned that you'd like to pass along?
So I would say it's just a constant growth and development and learning opportunity for everybody. You know, kind of what we were talking about earlier. It's not just one way, one sort of idea for everybody. You really have to dive in and get to know that person and recognize what's important to them, what's most important to them, and sort of support them through that. We have had a lot of success with the people that we support and serve with getting comfortable learning more about HRC. And sometimes, again, that looks different for everybody. So when I was mentioning what the meetings look like, and, you know, if somebody's comfortable with talking in front of a whole group or just meeting privately, those are probably the most important things to talk to that person about and figure out, because that's going to set sort of the stage for what like the review looks like for that person and how they're going to be comfortable with that process. But also, most importantly, helping people we support understand who they're talking to as well. So committee members, what their roles are, you know, and kind of going through that process together. That's probably the other important part is recognizing you are there to support them to achieve a goal and be successful. So making sure you're connected and recognizing, you know, the importance of that aspect as well.
Wonderful. And for everyone in our audience, you can feel free to enter any questions that you might have that have come up as you're listening to Jennifer and Daphne, and we'll get to those at the end. So thank you so much, Jennifer and Daphne, and we'll be back in touch with questions. So we're going to go from Illinois to North Dakota. So at Alpha Opportunities, the CQL staff reached out to me and said they just were so impressed with how Alpha had just transformed their HRCs, and especially interested in sharing about how they handle a review of rep payees. So Mallory, we're looking forward to hearing what you might have. Tell us a little bit about Alpha. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I am Mallory Everson, and I've been with Alpha Opportunities for about 7 years. I was formerly the Quality Assurance Director. I am now newly the Executive Director. About 3 years ago, we're a small organization in a small community in Jamestown, North Dakota. We serve about 60 people between residential services and vocational services and people who live in their own apartments. About 3 years ago, we did quite the transformation on our Human Rights Committee. We started by increasing our number of community members that were now on our committee versus it just being fully in-house. To that, we made an addition of a person supported on our committee. We did not have that before. We enhanced the training for all of our committee members. It started with every quarter they get trained on the new written policy. They are trained on HIPAA. The process of our Human Rights Committee and how that looks is trained to all people supported in the organization every quarter, and all of the staff as well. We implemented a new rights restriction form, and the rights restriction form is just much more detailed, and it incorporates a 3-step fading plan. Every rights restriction has the fading plan, and it is the goal that that fading plan is met within the year, and then you enhance it for the next following year with another 3 steps. People supported are invited to every committee meeting when their rights restrictions are going to be reviewed. Their program coordinator also attends that meeting as well to help with any questions or information that needs to be passed back and forth. If the person supported doesn't feel comfortable coming to the committee, we have the chairperson of the committee reach out and meet with them one-to-one. We understand that not everybody is comfortable with being in a group. And so that meeting is held prior to their rights restrictions being reviewed at that committee. Another document that we implemented and created was what we call the Human Rights Assessment. And essentially, it is a pretty lengthy document, but it breaks down each person's overall picture of their life into different categories and lists them very detailed if it is an area that is restricted or not restricted. And again, if it is restricted, it has a fading plan attached to that. That's kind of the transformation as far as that point goes. Specifically on our rep payee restrictions, those two have a 3-step fading plan that we wanted to make sure, even if it's not a person's dream or we know that they're potentially probably never going to have rep payee back, we feel that it's very important that they still have some sort of interaction with their finances, whether that be something as basic as collecting the receipt from a transaction at a store, or maybe they help staff count their petty cash. Maybe they use their stamper to sign their petty cash sheet when it is audited. We just always incorporate as much as possible with that person supported in their finances. Trying to think. That kind of sums up essentially the overhaul that we have done.
So, Mallory, what do you think are some lessons maybe that you've learned along the way as you've been making these changes, or kind of recommendations you might have to other people as they might want to be making changes to their HRC?
So the first lesson would be incorporating that person supported on the committee. We previously at Alpha Opportunities, they did not have that. They had an internal committee not built between any other entities or community members. So it was kind of that basic rubber stamping committee. And that person supported is a huge part because they're very creative and they are they think outside the box more than the team that is always sitting at the same table looking at the same plan. That person on that committee is a great advocate in, instead of putting a video monitor in, can this person have just a door alarm? If the fear is that they're going to wander out of their apartment, can you just have a door alarm that is in the rings in the next apartment where the staff are at? They are very good about thinking outside the box and helping the committee members see that, just because this is what we've always done, it doesn't mean that it is the only and best solution. And it usually ends up where you have less rights restrictions or it's mitigated a different way. And so the right restriction isn't actually needed at the end of the meeting. We have actually ended up decreasing our rights restrictions. We had a total of 117 rights restrictions across the board for all that we support, and we are down to about 63 rights restrictions.
Wow, that's fabulous. So
Yeah.
what was the impetus? Sort of what got you to look at and say, this isn't working so well, we really need to make a change? Kind of what drove you to do that?
So we actually had a CQL surveyor come in and make a recommendation that that the Human Rights Committee should probably be looked at. That was prior to me moving from the training position into quality assurance. And so it's just kind of something that I really dove into. The gal that does the chairing of our committee, we worked a lot of hours to ensure that we beefed up our committee. We made sure that the training was out there for all of the members to ensure that it's not that basic rubber stamping committee. And, we're assessing every situation individually to make sure that we are having the best outcome.
Fabulous. Well, that's exciting to hear. And actually, just for the audience, I didn't know the answer to that question. I wasn't like anyway. So thanks, Mallory. And Mallory will be around when we get to the end. And if you've got questions, feel free to drop those in the Q&A box. Appreciate it, Mallory. Thanks. So we're going to go from North Dakota back to Illinois, Epic. Doris is with us. Doris, if you'd like to tell us a little about, about Epic and about yourself to get us started.
Sure, I'm Doris Hayes. I'm currently the COO at Epic. I've been here for 27 years. So we are located in central Illinois. We provide services to right around 400 people in 14 counties in Illinois. So we have a community day service, job placement, residential services, and then we do a lot of transition programs for some of the younger kids who will be aging out of high school.
So can you tell us a little about you?
More about me? Sure. So yeah, I've been with the agency for 27 years. I started out as a DSP and kind of worked through different positions throughout the agency, and currently the COO. So yeah, been here for 27 years, needed a job out of college, and I'm here 27 years later.
Fabulous, thanks. So one of the things I heard from some of our staff was what a great job that EPIC has been doing in supporting the people that they serve to be members of the HRC. So could you tell us how, sort of how that came about, what you do to support people to be successful, and kind of what you've learned or the kind of benefits of that?
Sure. So about 6 years ago, we decided as an agency that it was important for the people we serve to sit on all of our committees, because a lot of those committees drive change in the agency. So we wanted their voice. But most importantly, HRC, where we're talking about and approving rights restrictions. So when we were looking at who wanted to be HRC members, I can tell you from my perspective, we kind of thought who would be interested. But what we did was we sent a memo out to all the individuals that we serve saying we're looking for people who want to be members of HRC. And we got about 25 people who said yes, they were interested in wanting to be an actual HRC board member. So what we did after we got the 20 people who were interested, we started doing interviews with them, talking to them about why they were interested, what exposure they've already had with HRC, if it was, if it was positive, if it was negative. We talked a lot about commitment, because if they're going to be on a committee, they have to be committed to attending and putting the work into it. We spent a lot of time on confidentiality, because we know that, with HRC, you talk a lot about sensitive information. So when we were interviewing these folks, we talked a lot about confidentiality. We reviewed policies and outcomes. And then after doing that interview, some people kind of weaned themselves out and said they weren't interested. But at the end, we did choose 3 people to be HRC board members. And then we had one that is kind of an alternate. So if somebody can attend, they can fill in for them. So after we did a lot of the training and the choosing, we spent a lot of time with people on the plans that go through HRC and what should be in the plan, what shouldn't be in the plan, red flags to look for, and questions they might ask as they're reviewing some of these restrictions that go through HRC. And we set up a system for our HRC members that they get all of the plans 7 days before the meeting. So this allowed the people we serve to be able to have more time to look at those plans, so they could bring questions to the table when the meeting was being held. Our liaison between HRC and EPIC does sit down with them just to make sure that they don't have any struggles in reading the plans. Not there to persuade them in any way, but just to be there to make sure that they got the materials and that they are comfortable reading through what's been given to them. And then at the meetings, they are very active participants as board members of HRC. As far as lessons learned, one thing that we did have to change for some is we had to do more training on confidentiality. And instead of putting people's names in plans, we just kind of said person A or B. And when people come to the meetings to present their own plans, we do constant reminders about that confidentiality, because that was kind of a barrier that we hit. But other things that we learned through the process was we never had term limits for our HRC board members, but because we had so many people that we serve that want to be part of HRC, we started doing term limits. So it allows more people to be able to circle through and be part of the HRC committee. I will tell you from a positive, from the people we serve on the committee, the outside members that come into our committee, we've had better attendance. We've also had an increase in people coming and presenting their own plans to HRC. And I think it's because they have their peers there. Even though they are committee members, I think it gives them a level of just being comfortable coming and speaking about their plans. And I will tell you the HRC committee is just more engaging. It's really enlightening when somebody is going through their plan and talking about any restrictions, that somebody that we serve that is a member is able to give examples and experiences, because it helps the outside members of the HRC committee to have a much better understanding of some of the processes and even some of the environment. So overall, it's been a very positive experience for EPIC and then just the HRC board members in general.
So what level of support, or would you talk about kind of how much time maybe the investment is in terms of supporting those members to really be able to be active participants?
Sure. So when we give them the plans 7 days before, typically each person has between 2 and 3 plans. So our liaison probably spends maybe an hour and a half with each member. So a total of, 3 or 4 hours with them prior to HRC meetings. Our HRC meetings are once a month. If somebody, they're very good if they have questions that they will go back to the liaison and ask. And then our HRC meetings usually last about an hour. Depending on how many people actually come present on their own, it could take a little bit longer. So Angela, I would say maybe 5 hours a month, the liaison spends time with them, actually making sure that they're comfortable with what they're reviewing.
Great. So any other kind of lessons learned or hiccups that you found solutions for?
Yeah, I think the biggest hiccup was the terms and then confidentiality. But what I will add is, if you can get people you serve on the HRC committee, I think that you will see big changes in how that committee runs, and just how impactful those people can be on the other members that are part of an HRC committee. So I totally push other agencies to do that.
Wonderful, thank you. Again, if you have questions for Doris or just in general about this idea, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box, and Doris will be around at question time. Thanks, Doris, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we're gonna head over now to another Illinois committee, and this is Aspire. We've got Margie and Tina with us. Margie and Tina, you want to tell us a little bit about Aspire and about yourselves?
Absolutely. I'm Tina Lowry. I'm the Director of Quality at Aspire, and this is...
I'm Margie Chalupka, and I am the Director of Residential Experience with Aspire.
So Aspire is an organization in northeastern Illinois that has been around since about 1960, and we provide supports to individuals who have a diagnosis of intellectual or developmental disability in community residential, life enrichment, or community employment. We also have a couple social enterprise or parts of our organization, which include Aspire Coffee Works. Personally, my favorite, because I'm addicted to coffee. For anyone who knows me, they know I'm addicted to coffee. And then we also sell artwork that is created and designed by some people that happen to have a disability. And this is how they have decided that they want to make money in their life. So a really cool program called Art 360 here at Aspire. Additionally, Aspire has a very specialized DEI program that focuses specifically on disability and providing disability DEI resources to organizations, including talking about how to make accommodations available for employees in the workforce. So there is more recently a training available for employers to be able to utilize, and that is through Paylocity. We're really excited about that as well. So.
Wonderful. So when I reached out to our staff, I heard that you had a great HRC going, and that you had developed something called the Behavior Enrichment Committee that interfaces with the HRC. So tell us a little bit about the committee. What was the impetus to start it? How does it work? All those sorts of things.
Exactly. And thank you for that. So the rights of people receiving supports is extremely important to those that are working here at Aspire, as much as it is to the people that are receiving those supports. So before anything comes to me as the chairperson at HRC, it has to go through Margie as the chairperson over at our BEC. So I'm going to let Margie talk about our Behavior Enrichment Committee.
So our Behavior Enrichment Committee has been, we have had that involved in partnering with our HRC committee for many years. And the why of a behavior committee is really, it's an internal review of the programs, really focusing mostly with the clinical program and making sure those interventions and those supports are not in violation of anybody's rights and encouraging growth and encouraging opportunities for growth, but also to assure that there's quality within those programs. So behind the scenes, I think we start with, when we talk about our BEC, is, you know, kind of like when we were in school and everybody started with an A, everybody starts with full rights. And that's where we want our point to be. And that's always the point to go to. You know, you want to make sure that you are starting with a full amount or the big A. And so everybody has those rights going in. And then there's some important components when you are looking at a BEC to make sure and ensure those rights are being respected, encouraged, and you know, not violated in any way or restricted. And when you're going in with restriction, what are you talking about? I think there's some really important components when you're looking at developing a BEC or continuing with a BEC. One is the flexibility and constantly learning. You want to be an opportunity to grow and change and learn. I've heard thinking outside the box, and that's something that's really key to a really growthful and fruitful BEC committee. Again, the committee is overseeing, but the meat of our committee is our clinical team that is doing a lot of work prior to coming to us and presenting these programs. One of also an important key component is confidentiality. So when they present somebody, it's not by person. So it's not like, oh, that's just Margie and she does that. It is actually just presenting it as, you know, this is this situation. And so you're looking at it as without judgment, you know, or connecting it with a person. It is looking at it as you would look with anybody, and making sure. There's things that go in before we even start a clinical program, or as we're approving, one is the education. We want to ensure that we understand what is the motivation behind and why is this person acting, reacting, interacting in a manner which they are, and how can we support that? So we're looking at those, what's happening before, why, and then what happens afterwards. So before we even create those programs, and present those programs, we're understanding the motivation behind it. So then we can be creative in personalizing and, you know, creating those programs for the person. We're looking at those three E's, those three important E's: education, exposure, and experience. So we want to educate ourselves on understanding. We want to, before we even create the program, we're educating the person and we're getting to know them and understanding their motivations, but also educating them on what the program is. So they are looking at us and being able to say, yeah, I think I want to work on this, or no, I don't. And then looking at those opportunities that way. Then we also look at education of the committee. So we're understanding as a committee before we're even approving what is behind it, how we're going to do this, what's moving forward with that, and then educating the team members. So during that time, we're also discussing how are we going to roll this out? How are we going to gather this information, roll it out, track it, all those type of things, because the tracking is important. We want to make sure that we're seeing that growth, we're seeing progress, and with that progress, then we can look at, lessening the restriction or even that. We have very active clinical discussions during that time, and that's where the brainstorming comes in. That's where a lot of the ideas come in. That's where we're talking about resources or other things that may happen. But it's also talking about when we are proposing a restriction. What is the plan to get off that restriction? Ideally, you're constantly looking at how are we ending this? There's an end in mind. But the most important piece of our committee is listening to what the voice of the person was. You know, those things are making sure that the people understand, or and have a voice of what they're wanting to work on. I think some of the coolest things that we've had is people, when we look at maybe a medication they're on, are saying, hey, I want to stay on this. This makes me feel balanced. This makes me feel good. Or the opposite voice of, I really don't like this way this feel. I don't want to be on this anymore. And then us working on how do we respect that voice and give them opportunities for growth, but also making sure that we're ensuring their rights and they're not being restricted. So that's kind of BEC in a nutshell.
So by the time every single plan is reviewed at BEC, I already know the voice of the person. That person can present their plan when they come to HRC, or they can have their clinical representative present their plan on their behalf. Either is their choice. And then as the plan is presented, their voice is in the plan itself. Additionally, if a person has a restriction because they've asked to keep that restriction, but it's not anything that they need to continue to have in place, that might be something, not something that they need to continue to work on, that restriction, so to speak, because it's something they want to keep in place. We'll switch it to an adaptive plan. So how can we work on helping that person gain new skills? Again, going back to education. So we always keep those 3 E's in mind.
Right. And there's nothing better than celebrating somebody getting off. You know, we've had actually a couple celebrations this year that they've progressed on and are now no longer part of the committee or being reviewed. So that's exciting.
We love celebrations. They're always celebrating in a way a person wants to celebrate.
So what do you see as the benefit or the reason somebody might want to set up this behavior enrichment committee that feeds into the HRC?
Again, I think it's that internal review. It's a way of people who are invested. It's an interdisciplinary team that comes together and part of that committee, but also looking at it, ensuring that we aren't just relying on, oh, let's just do it this way. Looking at different ways to intervene with or support that person that helps to promote that healthy, clinical program.
There's a good clinical discussion that occurs sometimes where you can really evaluate, are you utilizing the least restrictive measure of assisting a person with that education component and providing exposure and providing them some training or education that they might need. So a lot of times our brain wants to flip to what is the biggest bubble wrap we could put in place. That clinical discussion that occurs at BEC ensures that I already know they had a good discussion. That they discussed all of those little bits, so that if someone at the HRC level is trying to discuss what the actual restriction is, I can send that question back to the BEC and they already have that clinical discussion ready for our HRC of how they discuss all the different restrictions.
So how has it impacted or changed how your HRC meetings look?
Our HRC meetings are more person-focused now, where we can hear more of the person's voice in regards to the restriction versus just talking about what is it the right that we're restricting. We want to hear more about how does that person feel about the restriction? Do they care about it? Are they looking forward to moving on to an adaptive plan as soon as they're done with this part of it? And that's been a really important shift in our HRC.
Fabulous. I'm sure there's lots of questions, and Tina and Margie will be here with us at the end to field those questions. Thank you so much for sharing. We're gonna move from Illinois over to Missouri, and Jessica is here from St. Louis ARC, and they also have an additional committee that grew out of and interfaces with the HRC around holistic aging. And it just sounds like a fabulous notion, as many of the folks we support are aging. So Jessica, could you tell us first a little bit about St. Louis ARC and yourself?
Sure. So my name is Jessica. I've been with the St. Louis ARC for just over 13 years now. I started as a DSP, frontline manager, and I'm currently the director of operations. The St. Louis ARC supports just over 4,500 people in the greater St. Louis area, through a pretty wide variety of supports and services, including things like early intervention, counseling, leisure programs, day programs, residential options, just kind of everything in between. And I'd say that this committee was definitely born out of a need that so many of us have seen or will see in the very near future with our population. About 7 years ago, we were kind of gobsmacked with the amount of folks we had who were aging in our services, and they were starting to experiencing those really complicated ailments that can come along with aging, like loss of independence and changes in their needs and heightened support needs and things like that. So rather than kind of be struggle adverse, we kind of decided, okay, let's dump resources here, which resulted in a few specialized programs for those who are aging or experiencing issues with aging, and this holistic aging committee. So we do handle HRC or due process components for the folks that are presented to this committee, and we like to call it due process plus. Because there's a very heavy focus on, just like the name tells you, kind of holistically who that person is, was, wants to be, will be, all those different things. So we're, of course, reviewing all the rights restrictions that person may have in place, but we're also talking about things like changes in independence, changes in communication abilities, cognitive decline, physical decline, through a very different lens. This committee is primarily made up of community members, which makes it so beautiful for us. We are very lucky to have resources and people who are giving of their time in our community. And we have several different professional capacities on this committee, including a pharmacist, a dietitian, an RN, a certified developmental disabilities RN, a nurse practitioner, a researcher, at the university level, a gerontologist, a couple other providers in the area, some DSPs who have just shown that they're quite skilled in supporting someone through the aging process and are really creative with their ideas, and of course, self-advocates. So we've gotten really lucky to have such external participation in this committee. And through that external participation, we've seen this really crafty and meaningful conversation about how rights restrictions, aging ailments, and medications interact. Some of those medical professionals I talked about are, of course, far more well-versed in what a medication does, or what we thought it did and what it actually does 20 years later, and can give some really meaningful guidance on different medical aspects that we as providers don't have the knowledge base to do. I would say that one of the restrictions we review most is modified diets. As we have seen and supported people through aging, there may come a time where maybe they end up with a dysphagia diagnosis or something, whether it's the musculature or their bones aren't allowing them to swallow as safely as they once did. So of course we want to make sure that they can eat safely. And we definitely have a hard time considering those things and reviewing those things, because we know ultimately it's a health and safety need and we want this person to eat safely. But how can we brainstorm on ways to make this a higher quality of life situation when we're talking about modifying their diet or how they participate in that modification to make it more meaningful? So I wouldn't say that our focus is on completely removing all restrictions, because so many of ours are tied to very serious health and safety things, but we do really respect kind of that holistic quality of life and involving that person and their support team in whatever they're needing that extra added support for.
So Jessica, could you kind of talk a little bit of a couple of things? How did you recruit and find all those fabulous people for your committee? And then talk a little bit more about, does the Holistic Aging Committee serve as an HRC, or does the information from the Holistic Aging Committee come back to the HRC? So if you could talk about those two things.
Oh, recruiting. So I unfortunately, I wish I had a magic answer for everyone, but I am lucky enough to co-chair this with somebody who's kind of very well known in the St. Louis area and in the aging field. And through my old therapeutic connections, before I kind of took on the work that I do now, we've been able to explore more resources through just good old-fashioned grassroots. Hey, can I have some of your time? We are very careful with the amount of time that we ask of our committee members and make sure that all of our communications are very concise. We, of course, deliver our presentation materials, which are pretty involved because it's not only the items exploring the rights restrictions and the due process components, but it's also things like a complete list of medications. I really want my pharmacist to look at those because he knows more than I ever could about medications. So we like to send those out a week in advance and make sure that everything is perfectly organized and ready for them to review. But through connections over the years is really how we recruit. For example, one of our committee members, one of the nurses, was an acute nurse for one of our participants at some point during an aging ailment. This person was having a lot of very repeated medical issues. Due to their digestional tract things happening, just kind of one right after the other. And she saw him for that. And then we said, hey, you're really knowledgeable and you seem to have the same holistic idea that we do, where you consider all aspects of a person, not just the specific thing that you're talking about. And she's been on our committee for about 4 years now. And continues to give her time. So it's just seeking out those connections. And of course, some of those connections that we have, we try and make it beneficial for both. So we do have several professional therapists, OTs, PTs, speech therapists, things like that, who work in the dementia world, the dementia service world without IDD. But occasionally in nursing homes or care settings, they will have somebody with IDD, and we kind of share our knowledge base and what we know about how to provide supports, and they share with us so that we can both win. Nice. So we try and make it as mutually beneficial as possible, but ultimately we just have built relationships to the point where people are interested and committed to these needs and these people the same way we are. And the Holistic Aging Committee does serve as the HRC for the individuals it reviews. We review about 50 individuals a year for our agency, and we have another very healthy due process committee that reviews at least double that. And that committee is, of course, perfectly functional and beautiful, but some of the needs and focuses are just a bit different when you're reviewing a 21-year-old and a 90-year-old. Yeah. So we just wanted that specialization.
So who makes the decision about whether this is going to go the HRC route or whether it's going to go the holistic aging route?
The person and the team.
Okay.
So there's no set age criteria or anything like that as far as accessing which committee. But we do ask that anybody who's being reviewed does either have one or more of the following things. So it's cognitive decline, physical decline, loss of independence, or a change in ability to communicate. We also offer the option out for folks in our agency who don't have any type of rights restriction, but meet some of those other criteria, so that we can brainstorm together on a possible support solution. I think one important question that we ask, in addition to the focus on the person, is we also ask the question, what does the support team need? Because we know that if they have what they need, they're going to offer better outcomes to the person they're supporting. So do they need more training? Do they need more brainstorming on a dementia capable space or something like that, to kind of add resources and give so that the person ends up with a lesser restriction?
Nice. Very nice. So tell me, raises the question for me, has this increased your ability to help people age in place? Has it reduced the need for people to move to a more intensive setting, you know, that sort of thing?
Yes, and without the data in front of my face
Sure.
to give you numbers, but I would definitely say you know, we started in 1950. So about 7 years ago, we were hitting a really sweet spot where a lot of our folks were kind of that upper 60s, 70s, 80s range, all at the same time. So we had a new elder population. And we decided then and there that we were committed to helping people age in place as long as that's what they wanted. So we have had some folks who chose to live in a nursing home because they liked seeing all the nurses and they thought it was fun. So of course we didn't get in their way, and there are limitations to that as well. We can't be all things to all people and have a really high level of quality. So we kind of had to set some parameters there, but I would say definitely yes, because we have so many creative resources for aging that it has definitely helped people age in place more successfully.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And again, Jessica's going to hang around and she's available for questions. So please drop those in the Q&A. We're going to go on over or up, I should say, to Canada. Katie's here from Community Living Brant. And Katie, if you'll tell us a little about yourself and about Community Living Brant. And the reason that we invited Katie to join us today is, I don't know if it's true, but I believe that Community Living Brant thinks that they are the first HRC that was created. But regardless, it's been around for a very long time. So it begs the question, how do you keep your HRC vibrant and strong and relevant? So Katie?
Awesome, thank you. My name is Katie Gard. I am the Director of Supports and Services here at Community Living Brant. Prior to this, I was a supervisor of several of our individualized services and supports for about 5 years. And before beginning my journey at CL Brant, I provided direct supports with people for almost 10 years. And throughout my employment history, I've maintained a passion for supporting people to live autonomous and meaningful lives, and supporting people to be connected in their communities. And this passion has continued to be at the forefront of all of my roles within our organization, including my work with our External Rights Committee. Just a bit about Community Living Brant. CL Brant is a not-for-profit organization that provides a diverse range of supports and services to approximately 360 adults who experience intellectual disabilities and their families. We employ approximately 250 people, many of whom have worked for the agency for 20 years or more. This year we celebrated its 70th anniversary. And we are accredited with CQL. Our connection with CQL dates back to the 90s, where we participated in a pilot related to personal outcome measures. And the result of this pilot was our agency embracing personal outcome measures as our tool to measure quality of life and services. And once we understood that as an agency, we also understood that we were violating people's rights by imposing restrictions with no form of due process. So that's when we embraced the need for an internal rights committee organization. So moving on to what has kept our rights committee so vibrant and strong. So our rights committee celebrated its 25th anniversary. There is a sense that we were the first in Ontario. I'm not sure if we were the first ever, but the committee is at arm's length of the agency. So meaning no staff or board members can serve as members of the committee. 3 of our members, the chair, who is a community advocate, and a parent representative, have been members of the committee since the start, so for 25 years. And the stability, one of the things we've learned is that the stability that these members have provided to the committee, along with the mentoring and the support that they offer to new members, is extremely vital to the committee's continued strength. The members know people's histories. They've been following along in their journey. So they offer that continuity and they carry an invaluable knowledge. We've learned of our newer members joining the committee that they bring fresh perspectives from their various backgrounds and experiences, which continues to enhance the committee's vibrancy. Committee members say that this is one of the most fulfilling roles that they've had, and it seems to trickle to our newer members as well. They really enjoy the experience of providing that feedback and continuing to challenge us in unique ways. The committee maintains an important role in the supportive networks of those who choose our services, and it is with their collaboration that we continue to see people grow and make positive changes in their lives. So again, they provide insightful feedback, and they're persistent in challenging us to find creative ways to support people to live more autonomous lives. As an organization, we adopted an asset-based community development approach. This approach focuses on the gifts, the skills, and the assets that exist within individual citizens, neighborhoods, associations, and institutions. And the premise is that our community becomes strong when citizens come together and share their gifts and assets with others. The relationships that Community Living Brant has developed with individuals that have been forged from this approach have brought us some of our newer members. In addition, it's through that asset-based community development lens that we have strengthened our work of supporting each person to have a strong sense of community, meaningful relationships, and a true sense of belonging. Back to the committee plays a vital role in ensuring that the rights of the people we support are protected and their voices are fostered and supported. They provide encouragement for our support staff to think creatively and remind us to give space for people to take some risks. Sometimes this is what is needed to move forward in a being lifted. So as service providers, sometimes we're the ones to be standing in the way of people. Our committee is excellent at recognizing, remind us to think outside of the box, which we've heard a couple times earlier in the presentations. In my short time working with our external rights committee, I've come to appreciate the commitment members give to this work. It's so evident when they sell as much for the journey with people as we are. Since 1997, 100 people supported have had restrictions presented to the committee, with many successfully being lifted. But at the same time, ensuring that we respond to and respect each person's unique needs and preferences, as well as their rights. Today, of the 360 people Community Living Brant supports, 38 individuals have active rights restrictions in place. Of those 38 people, 25 have restrictions solely related to prescribed medication. So over the past 25 years, we've seen many people grow, overcome their need for restrictive measures. And as our organization continues past its 70th anniversary and looks ahead, we know that our External Rights Committee will continue to move forward with the knowledge that when people have lives that are important, when they have real relationships and meaningful places to belong, there's a lot less oversight and restrictive measures required. Having a committee that's embraced these philosophies alongside our organization has provided that strength in having a shared vision and ensures that we're working within the same framework in our supports with people.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katie. One of the questions I have when you talk about it being, sort of an arm's length away, what's the contact or the connection? Who provides the information and support to the committee from Community Living Brant?
Yes, so we have a wonderful administrative assistant who is a rock star at sending out really streamlined communication to our committee and organizing everything and bringing everybody together. So that admin staff, although it's not her entire role, it's a fraction of all of the things that she does to keep the wheels spinning around here. But she provides that assistance in the background to the committee.
And so do people whose rights are being considered to be restricted, are they going to that committee meeting with it being external? Does that work out or not?
Yep, so people have the choice. Some people choose not to attend because they prefer not to, speak to those certain things, but certainly people are welcome to attend. We've recently returned to in-person on the other side of the pandemic, which we have really missed over the past few years. And I think people are really excited to get back in person and be able to be in the same space with the committee members. So we have seen quite a few people returning to being present for their presentations. Nice,
thank you. Well, thank you, Katie, and thank you to everyone. If all of our panelists want to turn your cameras on, I have one general question before we dive into our Q&A questions. Obviously, what we've heard from you all is you have fabulous human rights committees. And one of the things I heard a little bit about, but didn't specifically ask about is, what sort of training are you providing as new members come on? And feel free just to jump in, or actually probably what'll work best, the good old Zoom feature, is that if you unmute yourself, then I'll know you're ready to chat. So who wants to? Jessica, go ahead.
I can offer up what training we provide. So when we seek out a new committee member, we make sure that they're educated on all St. Louis ARC policies as it relates to the individual's rights, how we view supporting and serving that person as an organization. And then we also make sure they have enough of the language from our state funding requirements to know what those needs are. And then they usually will sit down with myself or the co-chair for the committee to kind of give them some examples of what they might be asked to chime in on due to their specialty or whatever. So it's a combination of, hey, read this stuff and let's talk.
Great. Mallory, I see you're unmuted.
We wrote a new philosophy for the organization, and so all the committee members upon joining are trained on that philosophy, and it really lays out what we believe in going forward in being as least restrictive as possible. They are trained in HIPAA, they sign confidentiality agreements annually, and then we also provide the same training that we do for our Human Rights Committee members. We provide to all of the staff and the people supported of the agency as well. And just so they can all kind of be trained exactly the same and everybody understands fully what it is that this program helps for them.
Great. Doris, I see you're unmuted.
Yeah, we do similar things as Jessica and Mallory. Probably the only thing I would add that EPIC does is if anybody's going to be on our Human Rights Committee, we have them spend time in different environments through EPIC. And then they also meet with our self-advocates, and our self-advocates are able to ask them questions as to, why it's important for them to be on the HRC committee.
Nice, thank you. And Tina and Margie?
So just as everyone else has mentioned, there's a lot of state and HIPAA requirements for the HRC, but additionally, our HRC members go through our volunteer training, our full volunteer training. And then if a person needs the training in a way that needs to be altered or meaningful for them, as there are some individuals that don't use written communication as their primary form of language, we do alter that training so it is in a meaningful way in communication for them.
Thanks. And then Jennifer and Daphne, what about you?
Yeah, very similar to what everybody else is saying. I think what I would add is for new members as well, just recognizing the continuous training and continuous education after they become a member as well. So providing resources to various webinars or articles or up and coming, different things that would be helpful to them. Also, one thing that we are starting to look at a little bit more is people that we support that are on the committee being a part of talking with that person as well who might become a member.
Right. So Daphne, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I guess I'm going to. So could you tell us what the best part of whatever training you got, what do you think was most useful when they trained you about the HRC?
I did not get trained.
Okay.
I got a call from a person that had asked me if I wanted to join the committee. I said yes.
And so you just sort of got on the job training.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I'm going to jump into, unless anyone else has, I'm going to look at our questions. What I'm going to say to our audience is Seth is going to drop in the email addresses of all our panelists. They agreed that that was okay with them. So there are some of the questions that are very specific. Some people would like to see that 3-step fading plan, or some people. So if you have one of those specific questions, once Seth drops the email links in, it's probably best if you reach out directly to whichever one of the panelists is going to be able to send you or answer your very specific question. Let's see. Yeah, the fading plans, very popular concept. Then there's a question about, is there a requirement for HRC members for like sort of recertification, or, one of you mentioned sort of that ongoing training. Is there some commitment or requirement for HRC members to receive additional training? Any thoughts about that from the panel? Tina and Margie?
So there is an annual commitment that is done for when the policies are renewed. Anytime a policy is renewed or there's new education that comes out, we make sure that that information goes out to our HRC. But that is their annual commitment to tell us that they are going to continuously be on our HRC. We've had members that have dropped off due to time commitment concerns, that they're not able to remain on our HRC. That's perfectly fine. We understand. But it is when we have our annual training come up, and a lot of that includes information that comes out from CQL or out from national level educators in regards to rights of people with a disability. We want to make sure that that information gets out in addition to our annual policy reviews.
And any other thoughts from the panel? Kind of along that question, another question is, people are wondering what materials or what sources you use for your HRC training. So what materials are you looking to as you are training new members?
For some that are EPIC specific, we obviously use our own policies, but we use a lot of resources from CQL. CQL puts out really good resources and webinars, so we defer a lot to CQL for some of our trainings.
Okay. Mallory?
Yeah, we have a lot of agency-specific policies. Our behavior philosophy, our human rights committee policy, a due process policy. We do HIPAA, we do a confidentiality agreement, and we have also used PowerPoints from CQL as well.
Any other sources or materials that you might recommend, Jessica?
I just wanted to reiterate that the CQL materials that are built for the people we support as it relates to rights and responsibilities have been exceptional for us, and they've worked really well with our participants.
Great. Again, these panelists have not been reimbursed for their their participation, and their participation will have no impact upon their accreditation. Let's see. I'm looking. A lot of these are very specific that people can reach out to each of you. Here's a question that comes up. So again, sort of from your experiences, if you've got a person that's receiving supports who has a guardian, and the guardian is really the one encouraging the use of this restriction, but the committee and the support team doesn't see that as necessary. So could you speak to your experience with how you've handled that? I know everyone's wrestled with this over time, but so Jennifer, I see you unmuting.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been kind of diving into a little bit more is guardianship in general, and seeing what supportive decision making looks like for that person as well, if that's something that's interesting or interested to them, but also providing educational opportunities to the guardian to have a dialogue between, if that person is comfortable with it, talking together. Or we have had instances, again, if the person we serve is comfortable with it, where the guardian came to the meeting, the HRC meeting, to have a conversation where we could all kind of talk together. But that is one of the things that we have been looking at closer. We recently did some training on supportive decision making. So that's one of the things that we're kind of diving into a little bit more.
Other folks? Hi, Tracy. I see Tracy's joining us. We're going to get back to your slide in just a sec. We're just answering a question. Thanks. Tina and Margie?
Yeah, very similar to what she stated. We make sure we're doing some education pieces. For us, and especially when we're looking at BEC, it really comes down to the clinical team meeting with the family, walking it through like what we have found as far as our data collection, how we're moving forward, how we're communicating the wants and needs of the individual, the person supported. And so it's really an education opportunity, but also a meeting with the family or guardian. And typically, the guardian is typically family, what we've come into contact with. We don't generally get a lot of pushback if it's state guardian. They usually follow our lead, so that's been very beneficial. But it's usually when it's kind of a talking through an education. And sometimes we get pushback still, and it's just an ongoing dialogue before, and we won't put anything through if we can't get HRC and then final HRC approval. And at times that is not going to be the thing that's going to tip us, because mom said, it's going to be really looking at what's in the best interest for the person and the services we're supporting.
Exactly. When we look at guardians, we're looking at them as guardians, not they're guiding, but they're not the ones making the decision. It always comes down to personal choice for the person receiving the supports.
Jessica?
I wanted to add in that we always make sure we get down to brass tacks with the person we're supporting before we go and trying to educate their guardian, because there have been so many times where the most well-meaning people, myself included, have missed the mark on what that person actually intended to do, especially when you talk about relationships and what they want those to look like physically. So know what you're asking for would be my recommendation on that. And then also take ego, take whatever your job title is out of it, and consider who would be the best person to educate them. Maybe it is someone mom's age who has a child of a similar age who can explain these things in a way that's meaningful to that woman. And maybe it's not the super young go-getter support manager that you have. Think about who's going to be the best person to educate and advocate in that situation.
Great. And actually, this question gives me a chance to get on my soapbox for a minute. I really think this is a huge issue for our field. We have spent a lot of years saying, well, the family is the problem, or they're a barrier, or the guardian won't let us do this. And we've spent years educating ourselves and the folks we support about these concepts and about rights and about all these things, but have we actually been spending that time helping educate and bring along families and guardians? Do we provide any of these fabulous training opportunities to them? Do we? So we sort of show up, and actually, Jessica, I always say the perky little professional who's popping in with their brilliant idea and will pop out 2 years later while mom and dad or guardian is there for the long haul. And what have we done really to support them to get to a place that we all are at? So that's my little soapbox. So we're fabulously happy that, Tracy, that you're able to join us. I'm going to go pop back to your slide. Tracy is with Sunbeam House Services in Ireland. And if you could tell us, Tracy, a little bit about yourself and about Sunbeam to start with.
Yeah, so Denise might pop in. Apologies, the calendar just put it in the wrong time. So we have had a human rights committee now for quite a while now. We have made changes over the last kind of number of years, even with the help of CQL. We have upgraded, we have a data system where we can put in our rights restrictions and that. So once the frontline staff, or I know you call them, sorry, direct support people, they put the rights restriction in for people, then we are able to, it's put in on a system, then the person themselves then is invited to come along to the Human Rights Committee meeting, and they're just asked kind of how the restriction is impacting on their life, what have they been supported with so far to try and reduce the impact of the restriction on the person. And then we also kind of talk to the people that are the person's support network then as well. So we've recently been able to recruit, luckily enough as well, people external. So we have a psychiatric nurse now on the panel. We have a general nurse. We have our senior services quality and compliance trainer is the chair, and then we have the complaints officer, myself as quality coordinator, and we also have 2 people that are supported by the organisation on the panel then as well. And we would meet then every second week.
Okay, so every other week. So tell us a little bit about Sunbeam House Services. So, how many folks do you serve? Kind of what kind of services?
So we are a service for adults with a disability, with an intellectual disability. So, and we support people to live in residential homes, in self-directed living and day services. We're spread out. Ireland, as you know, is quite small. So we're spread out over kind of one county, but on the north and south side of the county. And we support people from mild intellectual disability to severe and profound. So we have a mix of people within our service. We support about 380 people, and we have a staff team then of just over 500.
Right. So what do you think has been the most impactful for your HRC in terms of improving it, keeping it sort of relevant?
I suppose the biggest thing is the learning that the staff supporting the people have got. So people are much more aware now of what a rights restriction is, and the working towards minimising with the hope of eliminating it eventually. Also the involvement of the people we support in the meeting, and also inviting them to attend the meeting, has been a big improvement then as well. Mm-hmm. And I suppose the range of people that's there. So there is good debate at the Human Rights Committee. Like, not everyone agrees at times, and a lot of the time it'll go back looking for more information, or they'll go back and say, well, have you tried A, B, and C before this restriction? So I find that it's made people much more aware of human rights, and I suppose what might have been seen just as normal rules of a home is now like, well, actually, that's against the person's human right, and that's actually a rights restriction on the person. So it's been very educating towards, I suppose, the frontline staff then as well.
Nice, very nice. So we're looking at a variety of questions. One of the questions that has come up is how often, and this is for the whole panel, how often you're having your HRC. So Tracy, it sounds like you do it every other week. I've heard some other people say once a month. Is there anything different than that, Jennifer?
We do it twice a month. So twice a month? Every other, yep.
So combined between our two different committees, it's 3 to 4 times a month.
Okay. So I'm guessing that's dependent on the size of your organization and the number of plans that you need to review. So how many plans might your committee review on any given meeting?
Ours is usually between 25 to 30.
Okay. Doris?
Ours is a similar number, I would say between 30 and 40 a month.
Katie?
Other than when we review the psychotropic medication restrictions, we're probably under 10, I would say, and we meet quarterly. I would say we're probably in the 5 to 6 range.
Okay, great. Tina and Margie?
Psychotropic medications take up the majority of it, and that's maybe 30 or 40 per month. And then other restrictions as they present are maybe 2 or 3 per month.
Okay, great. We're getting close to time, so I'm running through questions to see if there's other sort of ones that, oh gosh, yeah. Some folks are saying that they really want their HRC to kind of challenge the organization more, to really kind of up the bar and say, well, why? Or tell us more or whatever. What have you seen that you do in your committee if your committee is doing that, what are you doing that's kind of facilitating that happening, that they're really holding the organization accountable, if you will? Tina and Margie?
We sent out a list of example questions to help the AHRC really understand that it's not a blanket stamp approval, that they really should be examining each of the plans or each of the restrictions for certain aspects, and more recently really examining the plans that come through to see that the voice of the person supported or served is in that plan. And so when they're reviewing each of these plans, they have this blanket questionnaire that they have to accompany them for making sure those questions are answered. So it's not a rubber stamp approval every single time to say this is approved, so that if they can't answer one of those questions in that questionnaire, they can go back to our clinical team, which I saw a question earlier of what type of credentials make up our clinical team, and that's BCBAs. They can go back to that team and ask them for more detailed information regarding that question.
Great. Mallory, looks like maybe you had something.
Yeah, our rights restriction form kind of includes those questions that the committee reviews and asks to make sure that all of the components are in that plan. The other twofold is there is an area that the Human Rights Committee writes on the rights restriction form in regards to that plan. And then in their minutes, they mark that, if they said next meeting, we want to see the data that has been collected on a certain area, then they have that in their minutes, and the chair is really good about reviewing and making sure that that data comes with that restriction the next time it needs to be reviewed.
Thank you. And I'm sorry to say it's already half past whatever hour it is wherever you happen to be. And as we suspected, we have an enormous number of questions and interest in this topic. We continue to be encouraged and amazed at how eager people are to really tackle this in a really proactive, best practice way. So no doubt, Seth and I will be figuring out some more opportunities to have these conversations and to get more questions answered. I really encourage you all to use those email addresses to reach out directly to the people on the panel who you would like resources from, or you heard something you'd like to discuss more. They're all very happy to share with you. And Seth's going to give you the little standard lingo about what's going to happen and what you're going to hear from us after this webinar.
Yes, so we typically send out a link to all registrants, whether they attended or not, and that email will go out in roughly 1 to 2 weeks from now, and it'll include information on where you can access the webinar recording as well as a PDF version of the presentation slides. So again, that'll be going out. We'll include all sorts, in that email will also include all sorts of supplemental tools, resources, information, the email addresses for our panelists, their websites, all of that. So you'll have that all packaged together and you'll get that in about 1 to 2 weeks.
So I just can't say thank you enough to the panelists being willing to be on and share with us. It's just such a rich experience when you hear from people who are in the trenches, if you will, with you and hearing what they're doing and what's successful. We really are delighted to see how many people want to hear more about this. So we'll sign off for now and just know that we know there's lots more discussion to be had around this topic, and I'm sure we'll figure out some more ways to do that. So thank you all so much.